one from 2004. We'll also show you the very worst media coverage surrounding the president's passing. Pretty despicable. Plus, we have new developments in the Mueller witch hunt front. Some really bad news for Bill and Hillary Clinton. Also, breaking news on anti-tax riots in Paris. And you will not believe what one teacher in New Jersey told kids about Santa. 5- and 6-year-old kids. If you have young kids, you may want to tune them out at that point. It will shock your conscience. We start tonight with our breaking news opening monologue. On his 18th birthday, George Herbert Walker Bush put off his impending college education. He enlisted in the United States Navy, becoming the youngest aviator in the Navy. It was 6 months after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In the following years, he flew dozens of combat missions all across the Pacific Ocean. After one such mission in 1944, his plane's engine was set ablaze by enemy fire, forcing him to bail out over the ocean. After being rescued several hours later by a U.S. submarine, Bush reportedly wondered, quote, "Why had I been spared, and what did God have in store for me?" As it turns out, God had a lot in store for George Herbert Walker Bush. He became successful in the oil business in Odessa, Texas, a U.S. congressman, the 10th ambassador to the United Nations, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and also ambassador to China, the director of the CIA. He served 8 years as Ronald Reagan's loyal vice president, which was one of the most successful presidencies in history. And, of course, he was elected the 41st president of the United States. George H.W. Bush had one of the most notable resumes in the history of the U.S., but his personal life was even more impressive. Along with his beloved wife, Barbara, of 70-plus years, he was a parent to 6 children, including former president, a former governor. He was a grandfather to 17 and a great-grandfather to 8. Through it all, he never forgot the brave men and women in this country that protect us every single day, make everything possible, including in 2004 when he sat down for an interview with yours truly. Take a look.
You know what touches me, Sean? I admit to living in somewhat of a cocoon as a former president, but I go out of my way to say hi to these policemen and the firemen there, and I'll tell you, the ones that I talked to were for your son. We're for the one of them hooked up the back of his lapel like that. It had a big George W. button.
These are the same guys that tell you they watch Fox News every night.
I'm sure
meet a lot of them too. They're good guys.
But you know, these people are not elitist country club people. They're saving our lives with their service.
Heroes.
And when they say we're for the president, I'll tell you, I get very emotional about it.
We'll have more of this interview coming up in its entirety in just a few minutes. But obviously, in both his personal and professional life, President Bush was always a good, decent, honorable person, serving his country. During his 4 years in the Oval Office, 8 years as vice president, he had to deal with some of the most challenging issues in modern American history. He saw the collapse of the Soviet Union after a successful strategy with President Reagan called Peace Through Strength. He ushered in the reunification of Germany. He constructed, literally, and conducted the first Gulf War in response to Saddam Hussein's hostile actions and attempted takeover of Kuwait. And along with his predecessor, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush transformed the country, at that time creating 21 million new jobs. It was, at the time, the longest period of peacetime economic growth in American history. They took the country, get this, double-digit unemployment, double-digit interest rates, inflation to amazing lows. The very same thing, by the way, that President Trump is now doing after the disaster of the Obama economy. They inherited the economy of Jimmy Carter. But, of course, the Bush presidency did not go without some controversy. They all have controversy. Some criticized him for not taking out Saddam Hussein after he decimated the Iraqi army in Kuwait in a very short period of time. He was also attacked on the issue of his no new tax pledge. You might remember it was the infamous read my lips, no new tax moment. And like every Republican president since Ronald Reagan, Bush encountered a media that was actively rooting against him. And it's only gotten worse since then. Take a look.
Can you explain how you were supposed to be you're an anti-terrorist expert. Iran was officially a terrorist state. You went around telling...
Explain that, Dan. I wanted those...
Mr. Vice President, the question is...
out of there.
But you made us hypocrites in the face of the world.
The president also got a chance to see a supermarket checkout scanner in action. Kind of seemed as though he'd never really seen one of those before, and the president said that he was amazed.
The Bush campaign's really been a model in how you elect somebody who even his friends think is a weak national candidate.
We find it's very steady work keeping up with Bush's lies. They do keep coming very thick and fast. Lying is something that comes to him alarmingly easily. It's something that he resorts to with, I think, a slightly worrying sort of skill.
Now, what you saw there was only the tip of the iceberg. During his re-election bid, the New York Times reported that fake story about President Bush's so-called amazement at supermarket scanning technology. They tried to paint him as out of touch. Although widely refuted, the New York Times included this fake story in its obituary of the president. Meanwhile, the so-called journalists at the AP, they couldn't hide their contempt for now the former president even passing away, tweeting, quote, George H.W. Bush, a patrician New Englander whose presidency soared with the coalition victory over Iraq and Kuwait, but then plummeted in the throes of a weak economy that led voters to turn him out of office after a single term, has died. He was 94. That tweet has since been deleted, but of course this is all part of a pattern, isn't it? The mainstream media viciously attacking any prominent Republicans, all while providing cover to all of their friends in the Democratic Party. Reagan was portrayed as a heartless monster the 8 years he was president. George Bush literally bashed for his speaking style, among other things. John McCain excoriated throughout the 2008 campaign as racist and worse. Mitt Romney called a sexist and misogynist because he wanted to hire women. Apparently these attacks are just obviously completely disingenuous when you have the people die and all of a sudden they now like them. Like we saw with Senator McCain. Most in the mainstream media, oh, they'll do a 180 after they excoriated him when he was running for president and treated him horribly, seemingly forgetting about their nasty coverage. A pattern to destroy people's names, their character when they're alive, and then create a veneer of bipartisanship, and then we'll say nice things about somebody when the person dies. It's so transparently phony. We've got the video evidence. Take a look.
Hi there, I'm Stephanie Rule. Clearly a little broken up.
Breaking that pledge showed the character and resolve of the man to do what he was persuaded was the right thing to do economically, even though he knew at the time that it might guarantee that he would be a one-term president.
We are mourning something greater than one man in some ways. We are mourning an ideal because President George H.W. Bush was the last of the greatest generation.
Such respect for the position, the institution of the presidency.
What a special person, what a patriot, what a person of service to this country, and of just incredible decency.
And an example, too, let's praise former President Bush, who the media was never nice to. Maybe we can use that to bludgeon Trump. And when the dust of partisanship settles, history will look back on 41 as an American hero. And when his country called George H.W. Bush, he answered that call. He answered the call in the Pacific at the ripe age of 18, like so many in his generation, including my own father. He answered the halls of our nation's bureaucracy as he entered that. He answered the call as the 41st president of this country. He did it as a father, as a husband, and now answers once again to his beloved Barbara Bush in heaven after they both had an amazing 73-year marriage. Our thoughts and prayers tonight go out to the entire Bush family. And over the years, I did have the opportunity to sit down with President Bush. We're going to play that interview coming up. Before we get to that interview, we first turn to a lot of breaking news. We start in France tonight, where tensions are very high after very violent protests against the French president, Emmanuel Macron, are taking place. This all started as a demonstration by France's Yellow Vest movement against the country's crippling gas tax designed to, quote, fight climate change. Now, this comes as gas prices in Paris are now already over $7 a gallon. Really insane. And so far across France, those protests have left 3 dead, hundreds wounded, over 400 have been arrested. As it turns out, I guess socialism, high taxes, and government-enforced climate shaming didn't exactly lead to societal euphoria. Instead of pushing a massive climate change agenda, it only puts a bigger burden on who? The working class people of France and anywhere else they use this. And while no one supports violence and destruction, should we be surprised? This should serve as an important warning to everyone here in the U.S. We'll continue to monitor the latest. Also, new developments tonight as it relates to the Mueller witch hunt. Breaking today, according to a report from Michael Isikoff. Remember him? Robert Mueller is now tying off loose ends in a probe that appears, he says, to be coming to a close. This comes today as author And 72-year-old Jerome Corsi filed a criminal complaint against the special counsel, alleging that Mueller and his team of Democratic lawyers sought his false testimony. And by the way, laying out how, quote, Dr. Corsi has been criminally threatened and coerced to tell a lie and call it the truth. And Mr. Corsi explained on this show he rejected a plea deal because he refused to lie, because under oath and before God. Pretty courageous decision given that he is 72 and literally threatened with what could be a life sentence in jail for not agreeing to test the lie to the special counsel. This is the opposite of how our justice system's supposed to work. In America, we all were brought up to believe that we're supposed to investigate crimes and then find perpetrators, not the other way around. Remember, there's still zero evidence to date of any Trump-Russia collusion. Nothing. Remember, General Flynn, George Papadopoulos pled guilty to process crimes as a result of the investigation itself. Nothing to deal with the investigation. Manafort, guilty on some counts, pled guilty to crimes, on loan applications and tax issues going back to 2007. Taking place way before he ever joined the Trump campaign. And instead of investigating the obvious collusion at Obama's DOJ and Comey's FBI, and of course them using dirty, phony campaign op research that Hillary paid for from Russia, well, they continue to push only the phony partisan Russia narrative, only to bludgeon, undermine, and delegitimize the duly elected president we now have. Also, in that vein, breaking tonight, Comey has reached a deal with House Republicans to sit for a private deposition after trying to force a public hearing. Now, will he ever be held accountable like Michael Cohen for lying under oath? Remember, he said the report about the Clinton investigation wasn't written before she was interviewed. That was a lie. Apparently, we don't have equal application of our laws. One standard for Republicans, another for Democrats like Comey, and certainly maybe even a third system for the Clintons entirely. And by the way, thankfully tonight, it might be closing time for the Clintons' shady and once lucrative business of turning political access into hard, cold cash, according to longtime New York Times columnist, even Maureen Dowd. Well, a recent joint speech by Bill and Hillary Clinton was pretty disappointing at best. She writes, quote, their pathological need to be relevant in America is belied by a Canadian arena where stretches of empty seats bear witness to the passing of their relevance. Even the few showing up, they were getting a discount, according to a new report. Tickets to see Bill and Hillary as low as $11 in some of the locations. If you ask me, that's still overpriced. Okay, a lot more to get to tonight. The latest on the caravan, the media's latest low as it relates to the passing of President 41, George Herbert Walker Bush. And you won't believe, you will not believe how one teacher decided to ruin Christmas for 5- and 6-year-olds. But tonight, we first remember the legacy of service. President George H.W. Bush. We're going to go back to 2004. I had the opportunity to sit down with the former president ahead of that year's presidential election. Let's take a look. It's got to be harder to watch your son the president than to be president.
It is far worse when they go after your son, and I would say unfairly a lot of the time, than when they used to, when I was in the crosshairs and would get condemned and criticized. Even when I thought it was unfair about me, it hurts much more when it's your own son.
Yeah, and you
not even a close call.
Not even close. Because I think about my son, who's a lot younger than yours, but I would think it's got to be a lot harder. And you may have to go through this one more time. You know, I just talked to that other son of yours in Florida.
He's good.
He's
really
got a lot of
good.
potential.
Oh, God, he's good. And they singled him out for 2 years ago as the #1 target for the Democratic Party nationally, not just for governor, but for Senate. Terry McAuliffe, for whom I don't, well, put it this way, I'm not very high on him, came and made this the number one goal for the Democratic Party nationally, and Jeb won by 14 points.
They did. They were, and the polls were a little closer going into that election.
That's right.
And he won by a much wider margin, and I guess made Mr. McAuliffe a little unhappy about that. You know, your son said something the other day that really struck me. He really did want to go to Washington and change the tone. Something that he was able to accomplish in Texas.
Yeah.
Since he's been there, and I'm not talking about the Michael Moores or the pundits on TV. Yeah, we'll get to him in a minute.
Oh, well, good. Hurry up.
But former Vice President Al Gore screaming, George Bush betrayed his country. Ted Kennedy regularly calls the president a liar. He concocted a war for political gain. Have you heard the leaders of the Democratic Party that shrill?
I've heard him shrill, and I've heard some of ours shrill in the past, but I've never felt the climate like it is now, nor the shrillness of the political opposition.
It hurts?
Well, yeah, you expect some of it, but when it's your son and they call him a liar, or when they impugn his motives, it hurts a lot.
Yeah,
you think I feel strongly about it? Talk to Barbara Bush. Because she just gets to tell me not to watch and all of that, but I can't not watch.
You're engaged. I read recently that she won't read the New York Times anymore, and
no, she doesn't.
Tells you to stop whining about it when you do read it.
Yeah, I still read about it, and I'm whining more and much more publicly than I used to.
Why?
Because I think they've gone too far. I think they are advocates for the Democrats. I think they have lost their objectivity that they did have many years ago. I think there's a certain arrogance amongst a lot of their people. I think, you expect this on the op-ed page. You got people in there that smear George and slam him every day, but that's different. But when the news columns, when you see subjectivity creeping into the news columns, it concerns me.
Yeah, I think
and they'll deny it's happening. And I say, well, too bad, I think it is.
You saw back at the convention, the protesters, the Michael Moore conspiracy theories about the Bush family. You even commented publicly about him.
Well, he's bad, and I didn't go to see his movie, and so he'll say, well, how can you criticize him when you didn't see it? Hey, we've had tons of people go to see it. It's just my problem. I don't want to pay one dime, some of which might eventually end up in his pocket. But he is a below-the-belt guy. He knows that because my family are public persons, we don't have any access to making him tell the truth. He made some comment, I understand, in this documentary that's getting him all kinds of liberal fame, that we got $1.2 billion out of the Saudis, or we were enriched by that. But he does it very cleverly. He gets it in a way that there's no libel. I don't like him, and I don't know him, and I don't want to meet him, and I don't like his movie, and I'm not going to see it. How's that for fairness?
Would you like to fill in on my talk show?
Yeah, no.
That's offering strong opinions. Zell Miller, when he spoke at the Republican convention, had some incredibly harsh criticism of the Democratic Party, and he said, he asked, where is the bipartisanship when we need it most? He's talked about a manic obsession to bring down your son, our commander-in-chief. He said they're motivated more by partisan politics, by national security. Today's Democratic leaders see America as an occupier, not a liberator. Do you see a shift and a change? I mean, we had in years gone by FDR and JFK and Truman and the modern Democratic Party.
Well, I'd refer to Zell Miller about the shift and change, because he was one and now he's not. And he's watched, he's worked with him, his own party, and as Reagan said, the party left him. That's what Reagan said about the Democrats.
You were involved in a revolution when President Reagan and when you were vice president and you proposed your economic plan and you were going to cut taxes. A lot of people predicted a depression would ensue.
Yeah.
You had the longest period of peacetime economic growth. 20+ million new jobs were created. When you decided to build up our military and end what President Reagan called a gap of vulnerability and confront the evil empire, there were those that predicted World War III would ensue. But we know what happened. The wall came tumbling down.
Right.
So there was a lot of criticism. Is it similar? I mean, if you look in the prism of history.
I think there's some similarity from the critics, some of the same critics.
Ted Kennedy, your friend Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, my friend Ted. We have a very pleasant personal relationship. But, when he goes after the president in a personal way, I don't like it one darn bit. And he knows that. You know what touches me, Sean? I admit to living in somewhat of a cocoon as a former president. But I go out of my way to say hi to these policemen and the firemen there. And I'll tell you, the ones that I talk to, we're for your son. We're for the one of them whipped up the back of his lapel like that. It had a big George W. butt.
These are the same guys that tell me they watch Fox News every night.
Well, I'm sure
I meet a lot of them too. They're good guys.
But these people are not elitist country club people. are saving our lives with their service.
Heroes.
And when they say we're for the president, I'll tell you, I get very emotional about it.
You say about the Bush family, it's not about legacy. It's about duty, and it's about honor, and it's about service. Is that something you and the president talk about?
No, but I don't need to talk to him about it because I know what motivates him. I know it's motivated him over his lifetime. And I'm just saying at this stage of my life, what that matters: service, duty, honor, country, service to others, helping others, points of light, and family. And in my case, with our two public figure sons, it's a pretty easy fit.
And you're proud of them, and you said you think you'll win substantially.
I do. I honestly believe it. But, you know, I could be wrong. Heck, I thought I'd win, and I was only Mary Madeline and I were the only people in the country that did. But I got, you know, I look at it this way. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Sean, and if I'd have won, I doubt that the president would have been president today, maybe in the future, and Jeb might not be serving admirably in his second term as governor.
Service, duty, honor, God, family. An amazing man, amazing family. All right, directly ahead, we have a busy news night. How is the media using the death of a former president, George H.W. Bush, to attack Trump? It's pretty despicable. We've got full analysis, and at some point, the kids can't watch this show tonight. I'll explain.
A lot of them have families there. A lot of them have families in Canada. I've talked with people from the Canadian Embassy. They have a program that unites family of Mexicans who are, or Hondurans who are working there. And they have visas for that. But these guys didn't cross legally into Mexico. They tore down our border.
No, they didn't.
And jumped, and they started this caravan. And right now in the States, there's like 8,200. It's not a big number probably compared to what happens in the United States, but in the street like this,
it's not. But I'm sympathetic. So finally, how are you going to respond when this happens again? Because this will not likely be the last caravan that comes through Tijuana.
Yes, we have a change of president, and this president has a very different mindset from the last president. This president says, welcome, we're going to give you jobs, we're going to create opportunities for you and things like that, and we're worried. In Tijuana, we're worried because they're saying that, but they're not helping us. We aren't getting any federal help right now, and we're waiting for that to happen in the next days. The other shelter, this was in charge of the town of Tijuana. The other shelter we're going to turn over to the federal authorities, and they have to take care of it.
Well, we feel for you, Mr. Lopez, and I hope you'll come back on and tell us how it's going. Thank you very much.
We hope this gets better before it gets worse.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is a Fox News alert. President George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States, is lying in state tonight at the U.S. Capitol building. The president has just arrived to pay his respects to his predecessor. Fox chief national correspondent Ed Henry is at the Capitol for us tonight. Ed?
Tucker, good to see you. That's right. The motorcade arrived with President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, just in the last 2 or 3 minutes. They went inside on the Senate side of the Capitol. We expect now that they will be meeting with some members of the Bush family, friends, others who are here. And then he will get a chance, the president, along with the First Lady, to go visit the casket. You see it right there. It's in the rotunda of the Capitol. This is the third U.S. president since 2004, former president, who has been lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. Ronald Reagan in 2004. Gerald Ford, late 2006, early 2007. To give you an idea of the history of this, there is a wooden platform that the casket sits on, and that is the same wooden platform that was used at President Abraham Lincoln's funeral in 1865. So they keep that in storage here. They know the sense of history, how rare this is to have a former president lying in state. It comes after some remarkable moments in that rotunda. You saw Democrats like like Nancy Pelosi embracing George W. Bush, of course, one of the president's sons, who also served as president. President Bush will be lying in state here until Wednesday at 7 a.m. Then that is, of course, a national day of mourning as declared by President Trump. And shortly after the public viewing, the chance for the public to go by that casket, they will go to Washington National Cathedral, of course, for the memorial service that President Trump will also attend, Tucker.
Ed Henry, thanks. Bringing it back to you in just a minute. We want to bring in now Dana Perino, who, of course, hosts the Daily Briefing here on Fox and naturally The Five. She knew the former president well and worked for his son, the 43rd president. She joins us tonight. Dana, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You knew the Bush family well. We've spent the last several days talking about George H.W. Bush and his legacy. One sort of facet of his life that I don't think has gotten enough attention, but maybe as a window into the man he was his great and lifelong love of dogs, of spaniels, too, I should say. You saw that.
Your favorite, spaniels, that's true.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, and just watching as the president and Melania Trump, the first lady, arrived there at the Capitol to have this moment. One thing that's just interesting about that is my husband, Peter, who you know, he's British, but became an American citizen in 2006, and he's been watching today, and he said, America sure does this kind of thing very well, and I think that's true.
Yes.
So yeah, President George H.W. Bush loved pets from when he was a young boy. They had pets all during their marriage of 73 years. One of the ones that a lot of people will remember is Millie. Of course, there she is. And Millie actually had puppies there at the White House, and one of those puppies was named Spot. Spot was given to George W. Bush and Laura Bush as a present. So for a little bit of history for everyone, Spot is the only dog to ever live in the White House twice.
No, I agree with that. And to write a letter like that after the campaign of '92, which never really got the credit it deserved for being really ugly from the Clinton side, I thought, and personal and nasty. I did cover it, and it was savage. And the Bushes, I think, as a family, were really hurt by it. To write a letter like that right after that kind of campaign really says a lot.
43 says he once asked his father, where did you find the strength to be gracious and to be so kind to somebody who had just beaten you like that? And 41 said something very important. He said, I had no choice. Part of that is how he decided to live his life. And one of the things I emailed to you this morning, Tucker, is this idea of personal responsibility, of how you choose to live your life, how you choose to parent. And that unconditional love was so important to his family. But I have to say, with George H.W. Bush, he had unconditional love for this country as well. And I think that now is reflected. Of course, he lost, but you know, it was not easy to win a third term. It's only happened twice since World War II. It's very hard to have won a fourth one for any party. But he leaves and he has a wonderful post-presidency, and thankfully history gave him enough time to see that his legacy was assured, especially on the foreign policy front.
I think that's right, and it's reflected in the coverage, which with some exceptions has been, I would say, fond.
Oh yeah, I have a couple I could mention, but I'll try to be.
Yeah,
gracious.
no, but in general, no, I agree. They're always wackos, but in general, I think people have been kind to a kind man.
Well, you even
Dana
have Evan
Thank
Thomas.
you very much.
Okay, you're right. All right.
No,
good night.
You're right. Evan Thomas, actually a good guy. Thank you very much. We're going to be right back. We're going to take you out on the pictures of the 41st president lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. Ever feel like you're the last to know about something? Well, Bill and Hillary Clinton might make you feel better about that. They are literally the only two people in the world who don't yet realize they're not as popular as they once were. The former president and first lady just launched a national speaking tour because $250 million is not enough. And yet sales have been lackluster, to put it charitably. New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd described thousands of arena seats being covered up in Toronto due to poor sales. Ticket prices, which began in the hundreds of dollars, fell to single digits by the end because nobody wanted to buy them. The market at work. Is America finally, mercifully, getting over the Clintons? Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight to assess. Mark, before we assess what's obvious, which is their time is over, the deeper question is, why don't they know that? And what is the speaking tour about?
Well, I would have thought that if you didn't know it before, looking out at, and actually Maureen Dowd overestimated the number of seats. It was actually 83.4% empty, the arena in Toronto, the Scotiabank, 83.4% empty. I believe, actually, the last time I guest hosted for you, the audience was suddenly 83.4% empty. So these things can happen. But when you're the president...
I saw the numbers. That's not true.
when you're the president and a putative next president, it's a great Frank Sinatra line. You should always listen very carefully when the public is telling you goodbye. And that's what the 16.6% seating capacity in Toronto was telling the Clintons.
But I wonder why. I mean, it's not surprising either. And I have to say, in their defense, they've played this out a lot longer than I ever thought they possibly could. I mean, it's been over 25 years now. I've never found them very impressive, but they've managed to get incredibly rich, hundreds of millions of dollars rich, and stay famous all this time. So they've had a long run considering where they started. But why do they feel the need to do this? That's what baffles me.
No, it makes an interesting contrast with what's going on in the Rotunda right now, because you can say what you like about the first President Bush, but his post-presidency was a model of a dignified post-political life, which is why he's getting which is one reason he's getting the send-off he's getting. By contrast, I think it's a Tina Brown line where she said something like about Bill Clinton. He has a heat-seeking glamour that lives in a permanent hyper-present tense and dares you to join him there. And I think that in her own way, she actually understood that they're on a perpetual hamster wheel. And for the last few years, they were raking in big bucks from a niche market. Layabout Saudi princes and Kazakh oligarchs and all these other sleazy figures who were willing to give them millions of dollars because they thought they were going to be back in the White House. Now they can't get people to give them, in Toronto, they couldn't get people to give them $10. That's what ticket prices were, and that's $10 Canadian, which thanks to Justin Trudeau is about $1.79 American right now. So the difference between what a Saudi prince is prepared to pay and what an average ordinary member of the public in Toronto is prepared to pay tells you of what has happened to the Clintons in the real world.
So very quickly, I'm just speculating here, but since you know everything, I'm just going to run this by you because maybe you know the answer. Those 8 or 9 guys who dismembered Khashoggi, how many were donors to the Clinton Foundation? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, the clever thing about them is that warring factions in the House of Saud were all big donors to the Clinton Foundation. I'm not saying, I'm not saying there's different princes, but they were all trying to buy off the Clinton Foundation in the good old days. Prices slashed to clear on Clinton Foundation speeches now.
I've noticed. Mark Stein, always so refreshing to see you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, a lot of people in France spent the weekend burning their capital, but most of the press in this country isn't interested in why it happened, and those who know aren't telling. Instead, they're lying. We'll tell you why these riots are actually happening, because it's fascinating, and it says a lot about our country, too. Stay tuned.
Minimums and fees, they seem to be the very foundation of your typical bank. Capital One is anything but typical. That's why we designed Capital One Cafes. You can get savings and checking accounts with no fees or minimums, and one of America's best savings rates. To top it off, you can open one from anywhere in 5 minutes. This isn't a typical bank. This is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
This thing called love.
Well, Paris is on fire. The city's seeing some of its worst riots in half a century. What exactly is going on here? Well, if you turn on the television to other news outlets, you'll see people telling you this is about gas taxes or economic hardship or rising oil prices.
They were fueled by an increase in gasoline tax, but have grown into a fierce fight against declining living standards.
The Yellow Vests had warned that this would be part 3 of a protest against a hike in the fuel tax.
Fury on the streets of Paris as the economic hardship long felt outside the city turned its wealthiest neighborhoods into a war zone.
Oh, they're lying. Now, most of them have no idea because they're not interested in anything that's not happening in Brooklyn. But some of these people talking to you on television know what's actually going on, and they're just not telling you. It's not about rising oil prices. That's false. It's about climate change. It's about the climate agenda. The French gas tax isn't designed to raise money. The president has implemented it for the stated purpose of fighting climate change. Now they're fighting their own citizens instead, because the climate agenda always crushes the middle class, always and everywhere. Chuck DeVore understands this. He's vice president for national initiatives at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he joins us tonight. Chuck, thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure.
What's so interesting about this, and it's gotten virtually no coverage, despite being Paris, a city most people have heard of, is that this is a coalition of left and right against the elites, or am I misstating that?
Well, I think you're onto something here, Tucker, and I think it's important to realize that these individuals, the Yellow Vests protesting in France, are really frustrated because they see their government helping poor immigrants from generally North Africa and some from the Middle East, and certainly being on the side of the wealthy elites, but they're being squeezed in the middle. And what we're looking at here is about a 30-cent a gallon gas tax increase, a little less than 10% on what's already about, $3.50 in taxes on gasoline.
Huh. Does that sound familiar at all to you? I mean, is there a political
Yes.
party on our continent that is tied to, say, finance and people on welfare and nobody in between and is seeking to raise carbon taxes to fight global warming? I mean, I've heard of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to realize that in Paris, you're looking at about $7.06 a gallon for fuel. Almost half of that is taxes. Now, if we follow what the UN reported, what they want to do is have a $49 a gallon gas tax in 12 years. And we need that, they say, to fight global warming, to fight climate change. Well, that would be a 14-fold increase on the taxes in France. In America, where the average is 49 cents per gallon of taxes, you go to $49, that's 100 times increase in fuel taxes. It would wreak havoc on the middle class, and it would utterly alter the U.S. economy.
But here's what I'm confused by, is that, okay, I understand there's people who are sincerely concerned about climate change. I get it. I'm not denying its existence. But the solutions baffle me. So why tax gas, which only hurts the middle class? Why not tax, I don't know, SoulCycle or expensive dinners? Or how about close the carried interest loophole? Or how about a finance tax? Or how about banning private airplanes? But that's never up for debate, ever. Why?
Well, again, I think this is about control. This is about who gets to decide where we live and how we get to work, the life that we live. And Tucker, what's really disturbing to me is we just had the National Climate Assessment published by the federal government. And a key part of that report that was touted by the New York Times and CNN said that our economy would be 10% smaller by the year 2100 and that thousands of people would die because of climate change. What was not reported, however, is the people behind the study were Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, the two left-wing billionaires that want to be our next president. They were the ones, along with the federal government, unfortunately, who financed this study that had no new science, but used very questionable economic modeling to say that things are going to be really bad in 80 years.
Well, then I just wonder, though, I mean, both those guys are for a gas tax, but instead of a gas tax, why don't they just turn over their billions to the federal treasury?